Hello everyone and welcome back to Simply Handmade. My name is Kell, and in today's video I'll be making a plant stand slash computer desk wall mount, which is a mouthful. But in all seriousness, I needed a plant stand for my plant babies, and while creating the stand, I also realized I needed a sturdier desk for my computer. So I figured I can combine the two. So two things before we get started. Number one, I had someone ask me how I water the plants without getting my computer wet. And the short answer is I just take them off, water them, and put them back. So not much to it. And number two, just so you know, I have all of the instructions and the list of materials on my blog post. So check out the link in the description if you're interested. I also have a handy guide to build this plant stand for a nominal fee if you want to support your girl. Anyways, check out the post if you want to build this. Now let's get started. Before I even picked up a power tool, I made a drawing of what I wanted on SketchUp. And I actually had two designs. The first one was inspired by this inspiration photo you see on the screen, which was way too expensive for me. And then I realized I also needed to add my desktop. So I redesigned it to fit. And as you can see, there are 4 frames instead of the 3 that in the original design. And I really like it. It's simple, it's sleek, and I cannot wait to build this thing. Once I was done with the concept, I went to the hardware store and I purchased a 4x8 sheet of plywood, and I asked the store associate to cut down 2 long pieces, which would be the shelves where the plants and the computer will rest on. I took the rest of the plywood at home and I rip cut all of the short pieces of the frame using my table saw. Once everything was ripped down, I ended up with 16 long strips of wood for the front of the frame and 16 for the top and bottom of the frame. After ripping them down with my table saw, I glued 2 long pieces together and nailed them with my brad nailer to secure them, and I did the same with the smaller pieces. This way, I had a thicker, sturdier piece of frame to work with instead of like that thin plywood. And in total, I had 8 long pieces and 8 short pieces. Next, I took an iron and edge banded the sides of the long and short pieces to clean up the look of the plywood. And after I edge banded all the sides, I trimmed the excess with an edge banding trimmer. You can also use a box cutter if you don't have an edge banding tool. This is not something that's necessary. I sanded everything down with a 120 then 220 grit sandpaper to make everything nice and smooth. And I forgot to film this part, but I added pocket holes to each of the short frame pieces on the side. On the flat panel, I measured and marked 7 inches and 12 inches from the edge of the shelf with my tape measure, and I marked 3/4 of an inch on either side with my speed square, and marked 3/4 of an inch from the bottom to serve as a guide for me to cut out the notches of the board. I did this for all the guides on both panels, and for each panel you should have 8 notches in total. To cut out the notches, I used 1/2 inch drill bit with a piece of plywood underneath so I wouldn't rip up the wood on the bottom, and I went in with a jigsaw and I cut out the guides that I drew earlier. Once the notches were cut out, I used a pocket hole jig to drill the pocket holes right above each notch so it'd be screwed into the frame. And this is another reason why I wanted the frames to be thicker. I assembled the frame using 2-inch pocket hole screws, and I also made sure the pocket holes were facing the top and the bottom, so when I mounted it to the wall, it's not really seen at eye level. Once it's assembled, I lined up the frames together and I marked the lines on the top and the bottom of the inner frame, which will serve as a guide to where the shelf should be secured. I shimmied the flat panels into the frames, and I ended up having to sand some of the sides of the notches so the frames would fit in better. Once the shelves were in, I made sure they were level and I screwed the shelves in with some pocket hole screws. I ended up having the pocket holes face the bottom and the top of the unit, just like I did for the top and the bottom of the frame. This way they won't be seen when it's mounted on the wall. I stained and sealed the entire unit and I secured it to the studs on the wall, and I prepped it for my plant babies by adding some grow lights. I hope you guys enjoy this plant stand, computer desk, wall mount thing that I built. I honestly have no clue what I'm doing half of the time. I am just using the little skills that I pick up along the way, and I'm sharing it with you guys. So if you have any suggestions or comments about this build, drop a comment down below. It'll help me for my future builds and possibly help someone else if they're reading your comment. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you were inspired to build something, even if you don't know what you're doing. I'll be sharing more small space and renter-friendly DIYs with you guys, so be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you know when I upload a video. Thank you again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.